When I went to my first day of that job, I loved everything about the job, except the one thing I learned was that we don't say the C word here. And I was thinking like, wow, why would he be saying the C word? I didn't know what he was talking about. But then he was like, oh no, the word crazy. And I thought, what? I had never been enlightened to the idea that the way we talk about this can alter the way people think about it. Every time you hear that word, whether or not you're saying it or someone else is, ask yourself, what word do you really mean? Or what word did they really mean? And chances are they mean hectic, chaotic, scary, disturbing. And if you think of those words and then you jump to people's perception of mental illness, I think there you have the example that language matters.
We already know what helps. Connection is the cure. It's our deep and meaningful relationships that give us hope and healing. Welcome to This Helps. I'm Marlon Morgan. Join us as we practice authentic and vulnerable conversations that inspire us to go deeper with the people in our own lives.
Andrea, what up?
How's it going, Marlon?
I think okay. I'm not really in my feelings right now. Hashtag in my feels.
Okay, I think that's okay.
I'm just kind of doing it, you know?
Yeah, sometimes you just got to vibe. I think that's totally fine.
This language feels relevant.
Mm-hmm. I think
which means it's probably not.
No, I think we're really appealing to our younger demo.
Hell yeah.
We have a great episode today. We have a great episode always. We've genuinely never had a bad one in the bunch, which I'm really proud of. But this one is really good, and it's with Annie Slease. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about Annie?
Tell me and the listeners.
Her work sits at the intersection of education and mental health. It's a path she found both personally and professionally after her own child began experiencing mental health challenges. A longtime teacher and theater director, Annie shifted her focus to advocacy and mental health literacy. She now co-leads the National Mental Health Literacy Collaborative, working to make mental health education a foundational part of every school and community.
Annie helps.
Annie helps. I know that's the point of this podcast, but every time we'll be 10 minutes into a conversation with one of our guests, and I'm always struck by how sort of like concrete the help is.
When I first met Annie, she was helping the crap out of people. She had representatives from almost every state in one room in person. And this is like 2024, where each person in there was there to see how they could improve the mental health of the young people in their state, including California. Shout out, Cali.
Very cool.
Yeah, I could not believe it. And so, of course, I'm thinking, was she like famous? Maybe she was a child actor that people, fell in love with her show in the 90s. No, none of it. She's just a really cool, helpful person who's passionate. And I think they saw how much she wanted to make a change and help people understand and give them a vocabulary for talking about their feelings and mental health literacy. And they just got on board and started doing it. That's what I did.
It is so obvious that she means it and really wants things to happen. And I'm really excited for people to hear this conversation.
Same.
Annie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we met for the first time in Florida, right? In person?
I think so. In person.
In person. And we had talked before that. But you are one of those people who, when I meet them, I have to ask the question, like, at what point did you start betting on yourself to be the change that you wanted to see?
That is such a nice thing to say, Marlon. And I'm not sure I have ever thought of things like that. I just show up and do what I think I can for the people around me.
But why wouldn't you just stay at home and watch like HGTV?
I'm more of a Schitt's Creek girl.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if you can say that, even if it does have an SCH.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. We're big Eugene and Dan Levy fans here, so yeah. I think you're in a good spot with that. So in your words, why won't you just stay home and watch Schitt's Creek?
Because there's too much to do. And honestly, I thought that I was always going to be a teacher, so I didn't really expect that I would ever find myself on a podcast talking about mental health literacy. But we find ourselves where we find ourselves, and I believe that we should use our talents and our passions for good, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Wait, I should probably know this, but what is mental health literacy?
Okay, so it's a 4-part framework, and it includes understanding how to foster and maintain positive mental health, understanding common disorders and their treatments, understanding how to seek help effectively, and understanding stigma and how to reduce it. And that framework was developed by a Canadian researcher named Stan Kutcher and his colleague Yifan Wei. They are, we're grateful they are advisors with us at the MHLC.
How did you first think, okay, this needs to happen, and then you found them, or?
Sort of. Well, I found them because I just was doing all the research I could to figure out what is out there, because I knew mental health education needed to happen. But in order for it to happen, there had to have been some system in place. So I discovered it, and I was working for a university at the time, and the University of Delaware. And I think my University of Delaware email may have influenced his reason of answering my email because I think just a regular old Gmail might not have worked. But I reached out to him from that university email in, I think, early 2023. And just cold emailed, told him my story a little bit, and he said, "Let's get on a call."
Well,
And
tell
that was
us.
it.
I want to hear your story. I want to hear the story you told him, how you got to that call. So let's use that as the point we want to go back to. You get on there and you say, "Thanks for answering my Delaware email," and then what happens?
Well, we should start with what I was doing before. I was a teacher. I taught English and I directed musicals.
Nice.
And yeah, and it was the life I thought I would always have, and I absolutely loved it. But I was also raising 2 kiddos, and my older child at the age of 18 experienced a significant crisis right after graduating from high school. And despite the fact that I had a master's degree in education and had, unlimited professional development from all sorts of different opportunities, I'd never learned about mental health. And my child hadn't either. After graduating from a great high school in Delaware, hadn't learned about mental health. So we were stuck and we didn't know what was going on. And we made a lot of wrong decisions, and we were deeply stigmatized. I know that now. I didn't realize it then. So that was in 2010.
Mm-hmm. And by we, you mean like as parents or as a family?
It was just me. My kid's dad lived nearby and was a very active co-parent, but was kind of, had been a college athlete, so was sort of in the suck it up and play through kind of vibe. And that had been sort of everybody's thoughts. I mean, I don't think, even growing up in a household with a physician as a parent, we weren't really talking about mental health in my household either. So we just didn't really know what to do. And because my child was 18, it made things even more complicated. So my child was afraid and resisted treatment. And when you're 18, you can decide. And I used to be so frustrated that I didn't learn this just 1 year before. I feel like I could have done something. But anyway, within a couple of years, I was navigating the prison system. I'll just jump ahead and tell you that. And there was a lot in between that had to do with bringing home an illegal firearm and planning to take their own life. And
wow, that is terrifying.
Yeah. It was absolutely terrifying. My younger child, who was 13 at the time, discovered it and thought it was a toy. Knew mom would never allow a gun in the house and thought it was a toy, but was told, no, it's because mom's a single mom. I just have it here. It's just for safety. So my younger child wanted to believe that and was witnessing lots of distress in the household. And within a few weeks of that distress, finally told me, Mom, there's a gun. So that was the beginning of our crisis. And within a few years, I was navigating the prison system. It didn't have anything to do with the gun by then. And thankfully, we were able to remove that piece of distress. But the distress just continued in other ways.
is part of what you are doing now as a result of not knowing that the 18, kind of leaves kids up to their own decisions?
Yes, absolutely. I should tell you, when our crisis happened in 2010 with that gun, I didn't tell anyone for 2 years. And I literally kept teaching, kept directing musicals, and I just thought we could get through it. And I had a very close friend who helped me with that gun to dispose of that gun. But beyond that, didn't tell anyone. And it was the Sandy Hook crisis that actually made me recognize that I have to do something. So I started writing a blog, and I wrote it anonymously. I called it Still Hopeful Mom. And I wrote our story right after the crisis and compared my child to the shooter at Sandy Hook. And in a lot of ways, there were similarities, especially with the mother. My child's distress was not the same. So I don't want to make that parallel, but there was enough similarity that sort of was my inciting incident. And by then, early on in that blog, I actually said, I'm going to get a call one day, and it's going to say, the call's going to be, your child is dead or your child's in prison. I wrote that. I wrote those words, and within a few months that happened.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think that's a thought a lot of people who struggle with the same kinds of things have and are probably afraid to say out loud, and hearing somebody say it out loud, or at least read it out loud, I'm gonna bet has been helpful for a lot of other people, though.
Well, and that's the thing. That's what I was gonna say. The blog actually saved me, and I think we talk about what helps, and I know that's your theme here. And for me, it was writing, and I was a writing teacher. I was writing anonymously, which ironically enough, I was talking about the stigma of mental illness and not saying who I was. I did eventually say that, and that was sort of an awakening on my part. But I came alive when I was writing because I finally started connecting with people who were reading what I was saying, and it was resonating for them. These people were all over the world. I had moms and dads. I had people reaching out. I was actually featured in a documentary film by someone from England who wanted to cover this. And by then, my child had already been incarcerated. But that was what kept me going.
Wow. So you felt in one way like you couldn't share this with anyone, but then in another way, and sounds like a therapeutic way, you were sharing it with sort of everyone connecting, and getting the benefits on some level of connecting with other people in a similar situation.
Absolutely. And it was, I distinctly remember the year I decided to share my name because I was directing Fiddler on the Roof. For some reason, I remember that.
Okay.
And I made this parallel about what was, the connection between that show and what that show meant to me and why I needed to say who I was. And I made this kind of, broad social media kind of outreach to the closest people who, I'm connected to in whatever, Facebook back then. And it was terrifying because I was the sole provider for my children and I didn't know how people would receive it. But it was everything I could have hoped for and more. People were remarkably kind and warm and embraced me as, an advocate. And so within another year or so, or I guess around that same time, I actually connected with Sandy Hook Promise, and Nicole Hockley read my blog. And I know you've had her as a guest on the show.
Yeah, great guest on the show just a few months ago.
She's a remarkable human. She read my blog, reached out to me and said, we're just two moms, and I'd love to have a phone call with you. And I did, and I drove out to Newtown, Connecticut, and I had the amazing privilege to train as one of the first presenters of Start with Hello and in their programming.
Right.
So that was really what the flip was for me to get out of education. I started doing that and I thought, oh my gosh, this is my voice. I found my voice and I can be telling people what I wished I'd known. And that was really my my focus, was that no other parent went through what I did. No other child went through what my children went through.
What was it like to get the call from Nicole?
It was humbling. It was a little bit, I felt like her loss was so significant that I didn't feel like I was worthy of her kindness, but I was just so humbled by her invitation that I took it. And ironically enough, the day I was driving to Newtown was the day my child was released from prison. And my husband, my child's stepfather, took care of that pickup because I was going to Newtown, Connecticut. And I was going to share this programming that I believed in. So that was really my sort of wake-up call. And then within a couple of years, I left the classroom.
Can you, for fans of musicals, since we have you, can you kind of draw some of those parallels, or are you open to sharing How Fiddler on the Roof?
You know, I was just thinking that as I was saying it out loud, and I can't even remember what piece it was other than the fiddler sits on the roof and sort of oversees all of this that happens in a story. Mm-hmm. And we see the fiddler. We don't really understand that connection, but I truly don't even remember where. I'll have to go back and look at that post. But that is exactly what I remember woke me up. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea. That was one of my favorite shows growing up, though. Yeah. My mom was a music theater director, too. She was a music director. And I watched Fiddler as a very small kid. So I knew I wanted to direct that show. But I honestly can't remember where I was going with that parallel.
Yeah.
I really don't remember.
So interesting.
But it made a big difference. It's sort of an emotional timestamp.
Mm-hmm. That it is. That's exactly it. The other timestamp, music theater wise, is Next to Normal. I don't know if you've seen that show.
No.
Well, I didn't direct that one. That wouldn't have been a good high school show, I don't think.
Okay.
But I traveled to New York and saw it 4 times.
Wow.
I could really relate to the mom. Alice Ripley played her, and so something I haven't shared yet, and I'm happy to share it here. And the part of this whole story that sort of was a secondary piece, and one that I don't tend to share a lot because I don't want it to conflict with what people know about me as a parent. But during my journey trying to help my child, I was also diagnosed. I received a diagnosis of bipolar 2 at the age of 40, or even 41 maybe. So
that's
it was
pretty
after
late.
It was way late. But bipolar 2 hadn't been, it was sort of a late in this, I think it was just in the DSM-5. Mm-hmm. It was coming out that year, whatever year that was. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I had that diagnosis, and going to see Alice Ripley and in Next to Normal was so powerful for me. Because in the story, she has this dynamic with her son, and she also struggles with her own mental health. So while I wouldn't say my experiences were similar to Diana in that story, I could relate to some of what she sung about. So that's why I traveled to New York 4 times.
Yeah.
To see that show.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing it here. I don't think it would be any different as far as people who are all going. There's a reason that's in the DSM-5. There's a reason that, and bipolar in general is something that often gets missed because of the timing of episodes, when people are feeling really good or feeling too good to make decisions based in reality, and then also feeling so bad that a lot of times, unless you know someone for a long period of time or you can get their history really accurately, it's often one of the last diagnoses to be considered. And so I appreciate you sharing with us. I'm wondering how that has been, when I was in school and going through some major depression myself, I would explain to my teachers that it feels like I'm trying to do my math homework on a roller coaster. And, it's an emotional roller coaster, but it's like, if nothing matters, how in the hell is this math problem, this word problem that you just made up and made me deal with. It's like insult to injury. So I remember my perspective was off. And so a lot of times it would interfere with what I wanted to do. And I'm wondering, as a parent, is your perspective different depending on kind of where you're at with your own mental health?
I'm sure that, I would have to ask my kids what they think, but I always prioritized what they needed over everything I needed, which I think led to my extreme exhaustion.
Mm-hmm. I can also lead to some resentment too, I think, and whenever we do that, even if it's for our kids. Yeah, I think so.
Right. I had my kids young, and my kid's dad and I were both teachers, and so we were really kid-centered, right? And we were out doing all the things with them and sports and all of that. We just really prioritized them, and I think because I had them young and because I put them first, it's almost like I held my breath through my 30s. Like I finally exhaled at 40 and went, oh, wow, that was really hard. And part of the diagnosis for me was about, there's a name for it. I thought I was just moody. And really for me, it was primarily depression. There were very few, I don't have bipolar 1, so I don't experience manic episodes in that classic sense, but hypomania is what I would experience. And it was really something I used to my advantage. It was
sort of just below that manic.
Yeah, kind of. I remember it's a little bit like just almost like you're underneath your skin, you're just a little bit electric. If that makes any sense.
That's a good way to put that.
Yeah. I could really drive that with my dynamics in my classroom, my authenticity and with my students, and I felt like it was more a superpower than it was a bad thing, but it was more often depression. And I think the realization that there was a name for it and that there wasn't something wrong with me in terms of, you're just real moody.
Right.
But there's a name for this and people have this and it's okay. That felt really validating.
Yeah, that's normalizing and validating, which I think is probably best case scenario for most disorders being diagnosed. I think, obviously treatment wise, it's helpful to know what would be effective to help you feel better. But I also think, the opposite of labeling can happen, where you start to feel like this is normal. A lot of people experience this, and then you can talk to other people too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like to share in, I guess I'm sharing it largely on this podcast, but I don't tend to share it a lot simply because I don't want my story to supersede the story that really brought me into this space. The story was about my child and my needs. I felt like I had been very lucky that I was a very good student. I was a very hard worker. Not that people aren't hard workers necessarily, but I had been very fortunate that my illness had not kept me from being successful in a lot of ways. So I felt extremely privileged in that way. And I didn't want to make it about me because I felt like I was doing okay.
Yeah. But it's so interesting how we do that. And I don't think there's a parent listening to this today that doesn't sort of identify with, it's okay to forget about myself. And sometimes it's kind of nice, because I'm just like an adult with all these problems and feelings and thoughts about the world. Yeah. And I can just read them a story at night, make sure their coach gets them some playing time. Yeah. Wherever stage we're at, it always feels, I think, feels better and even safer in some ways to fight for someone else.
Oh, yeah.
But then it seems like, some of the realizations you're having as you are getting older, into your 40s, having the diagnosis shared with you, and, maybe part of it was about you, and maybe that's okay.
I would agree. Yeah. And I'm sure it was also a level of stigma that I was still dealing with, that self-stigma piece, right? But I really prioritize the advocacy piece simply because, to get back to why I'm even doing this, I think everybody deserves to learn this way before we experience any sort of crisis. We should all understand what our mental health means and how mental health is not mental illness. These are two separate things. These are concepts that, had we all learned them when we were growing up, perhaps a lot of the crises that are occurring every day could be prevented. And that's really why I was doing this. Yeah.
Let's take first your example as a parent. How would your experience as a parent have been different had everyone you come into contact with had the information and a foundation in mental health literacy?
Well, first I can tell you that throughout my entire parenting experience with my older child, I always knew there was something going on. And I would bring it up. I would bring it up with a pediatrician. I would bring it up with teachers. I would bring it up with their dad. And I would constantly be told, no, it's fine. This is all normal. This is fine. My child did have ADHD. And I think, first of all, I would have never realized that ADHD has anything to do with mental illness until later in life, but that would have helped. But, and if someone had said, oh, but your child has ADHD, I would say, yeah, but that's not a mental illness. It would have never occurred to me.
Even if it's the DSM, it's
oh, sure, but I wasn't reading the DSM.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Got it. Yeah.
So as just a lay citizen, if I had just learned that mental health literacy, the basic concepts that I shared earlier, I would have trusted my instincts far more, and I would have pursued second and third, opinions, because that's really a piece of this. And it's what my advocacy has been about. When I worked for NAMI Delaware for almost 6 years, I would talk to parents and I would say, listen to your gut. You know your child better than anyone, because I didn't listen to my gut. I let people who had fancy, titles tell me that I was wrong about my own child. So that would be one thing. And then I also think I would have just recognized signs and symptoms a lot more completely, a lot earlier. And I think my child probably would have too, because if my child was learning this in school, it would have been normalized. Because I will say my child had a torn ACL in 9th grade during basketball. And we went through the entire soup to nuts surgery and recovery and physical therapy and all of that. And there was never an issue about going to the doctor. There was never an issue about going to, do these exercises or go to the therapist, the physical therapist. No problem at all. But a few years later with the mental health crisis, it looked all different. And I think that parallel is a really good example of why we need mental health literacy.
How did it look different?
Because it was normalized. It was no big deal. I heard a pop, Mom. I know what this is. This is an ACL tear. I'm sure of it. Like, my child knew what was going on and embraced the whole idea of going through the process, talking to the physicians, understanding how to rehab the knee, all of that. So why can we not do that with our mental health? Because we don't know.
Yeah. Do you think it's a lack of knowledge, or is it ignorance, or is it both?
I think it's a lack of access. I think our society as a whole blames a lot of problems on mental health, yet we don't have any any real access to facts. I know if you've seen social media, studies have shown that TikTok, for example, and I'm not here to slam TikTok by any means, but there's been a recent study that shows something like more than 80% of TikTok videos that have the tag mental health tips, I think, and one other one that's related to that it provides content that's not true. And over 30% is actually harmful or dangerous. If we're not giving people the actual facts in a developmentally, culturally appropriate way throughout school, where are people going to find their information? They're going to find it on social media. They're going to hear it on the news whenever the next, catastrophic incident happens and the people, the talking heads on TV say, well, it was a mental health problem. So when you have that, and that's the only context you have to the idea of a mental health condition, then of course you're going to be afraid. Of course it's going to seem, terrifying, and you don't want to do anything about it because you don't want it to be you. You want to hide under your table and hope it goes away.
Well, also, if you're a kid struggling with depression and you hear someone on social media or on the news say, hey, this most recent school violence took place because the person had a mental health disorder, the last thing you're going to want to do is tell your friends, your teacher, anything else, hey, I think I have a mental health disorder. I think I might have depression.
100%. 100%. That is such a major problem with the way we're approaching all of this. Mm-hmm. We have got to, first of all, recognize that the majority of people who have mental health conditions are not violent. But because our society doesn't have facts in front of them, and they're not learning this information in school, they're just learning what people talk about. And so we immediately conflate the two and think mental illness means violence, means school shooting. I mean, that's where we jump. And it's just not, it's not likely.
In an attention economy, the truth is not going to sell ads the way that a lie or a half-truth will.
That's true. That's true. And frankly, that's part of our challenge in the work we're doing in prevention, because I don't think prevention is sexy. So people don't want to hear about prevention. They just don't. They want to hear about really, what seems to be just exciting ideas. Things like suicide prevention, maybe, because it's got the word suicide in it.
Well, Annie, early on when I was, before I did any media training and when I started going to just regular, more of regional morning shows to talk about this, almost invariably the person would be, okay, now we're live. And a lot of times those morning shows are live. Mm-hmm. And the first thing they would say, what's the most shocking thing you can tell us about youth mental health? And it's like, what the F? What?
Yeah,
that's not what I'm here for. What are we doing? What?
That's right. Because we want to sell ads. We want sound bites. We don't really want to get to the root of things. We don't want to solve problems. We just want to have, lots of money around the issues. So I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, other than to think that it's hard to prove that prevention's worth it, that the investment in prevention education is worth it.
Well, let me take it a step further without getting too depressing. But, if the top genre of podcast is true crime.
Yeah.
Or, which I get it, man. It is nothing more interesting in something that and how I might die. I get it. So no judgment to anybody. I'm just wondering how we could position it so that people can know that they'll actually there's distraction and then there's doing the work and feeling better. And I think distraction is so much easier, and life is hard. So in our human condition, 50 out of 60 times a day, I'd probably choose to hear something that shocked me versus some honest feedback on how I'm effing it up.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, that's just human nature. Mm-hmm. But I think there's also something exciting about hope. There's something exciting about resilience. There's something exciting and inspiring about hearing people who've turned their lives around because they've learned something about themselves. I think we can get there.
Shockingly good.
Yeah.
Shockingly inspiring. What if we just start saying that? Yeah. You think that'll help?
I think it will. I mean, we've got to start somewhere.
We can maybe sell hope in terms of kind of bait and switch. You'll never believe the grisly steps that this person took to have a full night's sleep and
some really great groovy music underneath it, right? With that really really exciting music, and we can make that work.
Uncovering the evening out of a sleep schedule,
discovering the balance in her life that gave her peace. Ooh, dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great. That's going to be.
I think we could. That could work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, this will terrify you.
Nah, okay.
Being healthy.
Yeah. Shocker. Yeah.
I'm going to keep doing this bit the whole time if you don't stop me.
I'm not going to stop you. I think we got to do something. I will say one other thing that I think we could do. A big piece of this problem that we have is our language. It's what we say. It's how we say it. And I often use the word crazy as an example. As an English teacher, of course, I love words. So that's a piece of this. But one of the things I learned the first day I took a job at NAMI, Delaware, right after I left teaching.
Tell us what NAMI stands for those who don't know.
National Alliance on Mental Illness. So I took, after teaching for 25 years, I took the role of Director of Advocacy and Education for my home state's NAMI chapter. Again,
doing the stuff instead of just talking about it. That's a great example of my intro for you. So.
Yeah, and you know what? I will say I'm a risk taker, but I hope that I take risks thoughtfully. I take, what do they call those risks?
Calculated
risks. Yes, I think so, because in every turn I think I've done that, and I did that with MHLC too.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I went to my first day of that job, I loved everything about the job except the one thing I learned was that we don't say the C word here.
Oh.
And I thought, the C word, is that like, you mean the bad word? And he was like, oh, no. I mean, well, kind of. It's crazy.
You can't say that either.
I know,
unless
right.
you're in Great Britain, they love that word.
And I was thinking like, wow, why would he be saying the C word? I didn't know what he was talking about. But then he was like, oh no, the word crazy. And I thought, what? Oh. And I remember going home and telling my husband all about my day. And I said, but the hardest thing is going to be, I can't say the word crazy. Now, mind you, Marlon, I had been writing my blog for like 5 years by then. So I was deep inside the advocacy space and doing all I could on my own. But I had never been enlightened to the idea that the way we talk about this can alter the way people think about it.
Sure.
And if we just took that one word out of our framing for things, we could make a big difference. And here's my argument. Every time you hear that word, whether or not you're saying it or someone else is, ask yourself, what word do you really mean? Or what word did they really mean? And chances are they mean hectic, chaotic, scary, disturbing, anything like that. And if you think of those words and then you jump to people's perception of mental illness, I think there you have the example that language matters.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And I think it's one that we can all learn from. I think it will help. Just, even when everything's politicized and people are like, being politically correct, I don't think this is that.
No.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be the word police. I'm really not.
Yeah.
And there have been people who've said that, well, you're just trying to police everybody tells you can't say this, you can't say that. I'm not saying don't say it. I'm just saying think about it. Is there a better word? And I'm an English teacher, so I'll always say, is there a better word? And there probably is. And if you're saying something that could possibly offend someone and you could actually say a word that better describes what you're trying to say, you're kind of winning both times. You're kind of winning twice. So why not choose that better word? The other thing I think is fair is that I don't care what people call themselves. I mean, if they want to say, oh, I was just crazy or whatever, if they want to talk about themselves in that way, knock yourself out, do it. And I think that goes to kind of the point around, the idea of first person language. And people can say, I'm bipolar. I don't say that. I don't say I'm bipolar because I am so much more than this condition that I was diagnosed with in my 40s. I am a person who has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder too. But people who want to refer to themselves in that identity first language, that's up to them. But don't call that person over there who's been diagnosed bipolar a bipolar person. That I'm not okay with.
Yeah, that's not person first language.
That's right. That's making them their illness. So I think it all kind of ties together. And if I want to call myself crazy, I can do that. But I'm not going to call you crazy. And I'm not going to call someone else crazy. And I'm going to do my best not to call anything crazy if I can help it. Because there's probably a better word for it.
Yeah, well, if I'm being honest, I don't think I would like that if someone called me crazy. I think I would be a little, if it's funny because just a little bit of empathy maybe and thinking about things that way. Like, why would I say that, Andrea? Andrea, how many times during this discussion so far have you wanted to like nerd out about English and literature? Because I could see it in your face. Just do
You're
it.
just gripping the arms
Yeah.
of my chair so
Yeah.
bad. I
Yeah.
know. We got to talk a little bit off mic about it. So
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Absolutely.
It is a fun thing to be an English teacher. There's nothing quite like it, except to be a music theater director. That's kind of better. But
Oh, okay. Now we're gonna. You know what? If you have an opinion about something Annie just said, engage on our socials.
Get in the comments.
Get in the this is music directors versus English teachers.
oh boy.
We want to see what happens.
And you've got to pick a side.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm afraid of those comments. Okay.
No, I think our listeners are very nice.
Yeah. That so far. So far. Annie, so we talked a little bit about how it would have been different for you as a parent. And since you've opened up to us a little bit about kind of your own challenges and the diagnosis that you received, how do you think you would have had a different experience? Or maybe would you have had a diagnosis earlier if you had known more about mental health literacy?
Definitely. I most certainly would have understood myself much sooner than I ever did. The other piece of this is we know that trauma can play a part in the onset of someone who experiences a mental illness. And for me, that was a part of my childhood. And I can absolutely correlate my experience as a child who was perpetually bullied in middle school and in 5th and 6th grade, and the onset of my symptoms. They were pretty close. Yeah. But I look back in my 40s, and that's when I figured that out. So it would have helped a lot to know at the time that this was going on and work through that with a professional. And I didn't have that luxury. In fact, what I finally had was my grandfather lived with us, and he was an amazing human. He was this stoic, quiet Native American man who said few words, but whatever he said, you held on to because they were just brilliant or hilarious. So he would watch me come home in middle school and sit on the tire swing that he made out, or it's a little swing off the tree outside his window, and he would see me cry every day. And he convinced my parents to pull me out of that school because he was the one who was watching me cry every day.
Yeah.
And I kept asking to move out of the school, and they wouldn't listen. But when my grandfather stepped in, it happened. And that saved my life. I think it did.
He had he was advocating for you.
Yes, he was.
That's incredible. I mean, and you said it changed your life. So you went to a different school and you had a better time.
I did. I had a much better time. I got to experience people who had lots of interests just like me. It was a bigger school. I was going to a very small private school, and it was a religious school. And I don't fault my parents in thinking that was a good choice because at the time that's what they thought. But when I opened up into this middle school in 7th grade, and I got to experience music in lots of ways in school, and I had my favorite teacher of all time that year, and then again in high school, I blossomed in high school. I was a competitive swimmer. I got a chance to do lots of things that I don't think I would have had to get to do. But I was also dealing with symptoms that no one knew.
Sure. And that you didn't even know weren't typical.
Right.
You know?
I just thought there was something wrong with me, that I was moody.
I don't think there's anything more terrifying for, like you said, a 5th, 6th, or 7th, like anytime middle school and kind of going into high school. I don't think there's anything more scary than the possibility of not being accepted.
That's right.
It's like all you want. And it makes sense even from an evolutionary standpoint of like, if we were all trying to survive out on the savannah and people didn't like you, then you aren't going to find out what berries are poisonous, where to find water.
That's right.
And I think because it could have meant death then, I think it feels the same now. I don't think our brains have changed very much.
No, I would agree. And looking back, it's funny. I didn't plan it this way, but what I ended up doing was teaching 5th and 6th grade most of the years I was a teacher.
Wow, you went back
Yeah.
to the
And
same environment.
I made it better. You know what I mean? Like I was driven by I just love those ages, but looking back, it had to have been some sort of subliminal decision that you're going to make sure that this group of kids has a better experience. And I hope I did that.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know.
but that's the theme that we keep coming back to for you.
Yeah.
Is I think a lot of people would say, yeah, that's a problem, and therefore I don't ever want to see another 5th grader.
Yeah.
So what's the
Not for me.
difference? Yeah, and you mentioned maybe it's a little bit of the risk, being not risk averse. Maybe it's a little bit of the fighter in you. I'm not sure, but what separates you from a person who would just know that's a problem but not feel empowered or responsible?
I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I did ask that question. Upon my diagnosis, I was connected to a psychiatrist who was phenomenal. And I remember asking distinctly, this was during the midst of my child's struggles, I was saying, why is it that I can be so successful with my students? And I don't want to sound like I'm boasting, but I was a good teacher, and I know that I was. Why is it that I can direct 2 musicals a year? Why is it that I'm not checking myself in somewhere? Because there are times when I wish I could, and I literally would dream of it, but I would never do it. And my doctor said, it's called resilience. You just have it. And I remember thinking, could I maybe have a little less of it? Because I would like to go. I would just dream of like a place where I could just sleep for 3 days. I was just exhausted,
Yeah.
but I wasn't going to stop. And I don't know, to answer your question, Marlon, why I keep putting myself in these spaces where I'm doing something really scary, but I keep doing it, and I'm not sure why. I really don't know.
You're finding purpose in your challenges. You're finding purpose in your struggles.
Yeah. It feels good to feel like I'm course correcting from something that I never had a chance to fix. I'm course correcting for the next generation, I hope. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter now. That's who I'm course correcting for. Like in her generation, when she goes to school and she learns about her eyes and her lungs and her heart, she's going to learn about her mind. Because we are doing this work now that none of us ever had the chance to learn. She and her peers are going to learn about their mind along with the rest of themselves, right? And I think that's going to make a big difference. So that keeps me going.
I think it's going to help so many of us. How can other people sort of support you in this?
Well, I'd love to just tell a little bit about what we're doing.
Please
The Mental
do.
Health Literacy Collaborative is a national organization that is focused right on those 4 components I shared, the mental health literacy framework, but we're working really hard to bring that framework into schools. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're partnering with state agencies or leaders in states. So right now we have an interstate work group with 47 states participating. And Marlon, I know you know about that.
Yeah,
because you're one of our California leaders.
I'm impressed, and it's hard to do. And the reason that I wanted to be or accepted that incredible opportunity to help sort of support what you've been doing is because I could see that you were a person who wasn't going to let this go, that you were a person who had already gotten a lot of states and a lot of our colleagues who are in this work and who do this work on board with you, which is not easy to do. I know because I've done it in some ways, not from 47 states. So I think I can't wait to see what happens next, because you have done and continue to bring us together and unify us, and hopefully that'll give more power to the mission of and I do think power and empowering is a good word, because when you are literate in mental health and you understand what it is and what it isn't, you now have more control over your life and your decisions.
That's right. And one piece of this that I haven't mentioned that I really think is important is that this is an education framework. It's not therapy. So it's something that teachers can teach. In fact, it's designed for teachers. It's meant to be delivered in a classroom. And so we know that schools can do this, and we're seeing that it's happening in lots of places. And there are states that are even passing policies to require it. It's actually how the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative came to life. When I went into the work at NAMI Delaware, I had been watching the news, certainly, and New York had just passed a law in 2016 to be effective 2018 to require mental health education, kindergarten through grade 12, and it was the first of its kind law. And I have the state of Delaware is so small; you're basically 1 degree away from anyone. So I had the good fortune of knowing some legislators, and I was sharing that news with legislators. And sure enough, by 2022, Delaware passed a very similar law. And I was grateful to be a part of that. And my whole thought was, well, if New York's been doing it for a while, Delaware can just figure out what New York is doing. And I'm sure someone's directing all of this. Remember,
Sure.
I was a music theater director.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, surely somebody's helping all these states, because that's the way I was thinking.
Right.
And I was reaching out to my national partners, and my national partners were saying, Annie, that sounds like a lovely idea, but no one is doing that. There's nothing like that on the planet. But I do know someone who you ought to talk to. And that was my 2 co-founders, Jason and Donna. They are in Connecticut and New York, respectively, and they had been doing this work already as authors in the space. And when I first met them and told them that I think there should be an organization that's helping states do this, they kind of went, yeah, right. and they were lovely. And they were kind, but I think they were super skeptical because they had been in this space for a while, and they realized how hard it is to get into schools about this.
Incredibly, especially with the political polarization. How has that
true.
affected? Tell me something shocking about the politics.
Shocking.
Of this.
Honestly, it's not. And knock wood, I'm going to knock on something wooden right now. We have been remarkably successful at both sides of the aisle on this, because mental health is health. It's not indoctrinating anybody. It's not buzzwords that we're hearing in certain spaces that can make people nervous. It's literally something that both sides of the aisle believe is important. And we've been able to make little bits of progress in the states that we're working in. Now, I'm not saying every state is embracing this completely. That would not be true.
Well, something has to be politically advantageous, and someone has to perceive that as so.
Right.
I think.
And I think that has really been the lane we've kind of put ourselves in, is to be in the health space as opposed to things that can be perceived as, questionable. So we're trying really hard to be nonpartisan, because we believe that our work should not have anything to do with politics, because mental health is something we all have and we all deserve to understand it.
And it sounds like you've put together a less controversial way to bring kids in, at least at some level, and adults in schools, especially adults,
right.
and help them understand how to even define it, so that if we want to add to that, or they want to go to a more specialized program, they can. But it sounds like what you're talking about is some very foundational information.
Right. So where we've positioned ourselves, when we initially launched our organization, we knew that there were groups already creating programming for schools. In fact, my partners do that as a separate business. So we knew they existed, but we also knew that the problem wasn't the programs existing. The problem was educators didn't know this coming into this field, and suddenly it's landing on them. So they need the confidence and the knowledge to know they can do it, and to have guidance in understanding how to do it. So that's really been the space we've put ourselves in. And we're working on building confidence in educators through our training. We have a 1-hour training that we provide called Mental Health Literacy Aware. And that training is really just what you said. It's foundational. And it's meant to let people know what mental health literacy is, why it's beneficial, and how to start bringing it into your community or your school. It's not going to solve everything. It's just the start.
I believe that this would greatly improve and equip a teacher's experience as in the classroom. How do you feel like going from not having this information to doing the 1 hour training, how does that change things for an educator?
Well, what we're seeing is we're measuring their confidence. When they're coming in around 45-50% confident about this concept, and they're leaving at 98. So we're seeing them understand it. And I just did actually a training live the other day, not an MHL Aware training, but a conference session. And I saw it happen in real life. And it is just remarkable when you can see the light bulbs go off in educators' eyes. Educators are some of the most creative humans on the planet. I truly believe that. And if they have the knowledge and confidence about something, they can bring it to life to their students. But if they don't, and something lands on them, they can also be very resistant for rightful reasons, because they don't want to cause harm. So once you break through that and you can empower them for them to recognize this is not therapy, you're not becoming a therapist, you are simply teaching about content that you will understand to the level that you need to understand to share with your students, they just become very excited, especially when they know that it's a framework that can be adapted to meet the needs of their students.
So you're taking the burden off of educators who feel like if they start talking about this, all of a sudden they're a therapist.
That's right. That's been one of the biggest concerns around this work is, well, I'm not a therapist. I didn't study. No, you don't need to be a therapist. You actually, we don't want you to be a therapist. This is tier 1. In education speak, that means it's meant for everybody. It's universal. So it's tier 1 education that everyone deserves. And we know that teachers can do this because we know it's happening. And the research is showing that it's helping. In fact, there's research now that's showing extra benefits that people weren't even looking for. And for example, a benefit that was actually discovered with some of our advisors that we work with who were doing a research project, and they discovered that mental health literacy instruction strengthens relationships between students and teachers.
Wow, imagine that. But
that's right. And when they discovered it, they went
Yeah.
back in to look more closely to see if that was actually the case. And sure enough, it is. And now there's a research paper on it. And that is an incredible benefit. Every teacher wants to be effective with their students. Why not find a way to reach them and serve them, provide them what they need in a safe, developmentally appropriate way, and build relationships with your students so that you can teach them the content that you're teaching anyway.
That classic quote that if you go to a conference in education you will hear, but it's that nobody cares what you know until they know you care. And I think this gives a space in the classroom to have conversations about being human and what that's like.
And as an English teacher, we'll go back to that, Andrea. How about that? As an English teacher, I wish I could go back and teach the novels that I was teaching to my students, having the knowledge I now have. Wow. Because there are places where it would have been a natural fit to share developmentally appropriate information in the context of those novels. And that work is already happening. There are researchers doing that work now, that young adult novel study can be embedded with mental health literacy in an appropriate way.
Cool.
Isn't that exciting?
That's
I knew you'd
amazing.
like that, Andrea. But really, the sky's the limit as to how this can be integrated. And once we provide it to our educators, they're going to make it magical. They are. And the exciting thing that we're doing now that is hopefully going to help our next generation of educators is we're trying to reach pre-service educators in universities and colleges, and also graduate students who are already in education, providing them that training, that asynchronous 1 hour training at no cost through a partnership with the Clinton Global Initiative. So we already have students using this. We already have professors that are bringing it into their classrooms, and we actually now have a resource that professors can use to sort of create more discussion and extension activities around the course if they build it into their coursework. But it's starting to really happen, and I can't imagine how exciting it will be for the next generation of educators to walk into the school building and know this already.
It's amazing.
What novel, and this is for Andrea and Annie, if you could go back and through the lens of mental health literacy, take the characters and sort of explain behavior or, you know, make guesses, what novel would it be?
So the first one I think of is Pam Munoz Ryan's book called Becoming Naomi Leone. And that was something I taught with my fifth graders. And it was about a young girl, Naomi, who experienced selective mutism. And that's which is a form of anxiety. And her mother lived with alcohol use disorder, and she lived with her grandmother. And so there were lots of aspects to their story that lend themselves well to the ideas around one of the most common mental health disorder that children have, which is anxiety. And how Naomi finds her voice, and that's what it's about. It's called Becoming Naomi Leone. She becomes herself, and she becomes Naomi the lion. So that's the first novel I think of. And the second one that comes to mind is Don Quixote, which I taught in fifth grade as well. It was obviously a children's abridged version, but to think about Don Quixote, and I did definitely embrace a more empathetic perspective, because by the time I was teaching that, I certainly had much more awareness around mental illness, but I didn't have the framing. I didn't have the words. I didn't have the language that could have helped me do it better. We didn't call Don Quixote crazy. We just didn't. We didn't use those terms, and that was previous to my job that we weren't allowed to use that word. But we had a little bit of empathy around it, but I think it would have been a lot more interesting to frame it in a way that used mental health literacy concepts to understand Sancho's natural affinity to him and his work to try to care for his friend.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Andrea, I want you to answer it too.
Oh, this is the most stressful question you've ever asked me. I think any middle grade novel, because it's stuff that kids are dealing with very directly. Like, I was a Ramona Quimby girl. I have always said I'm not, I shouldn't be diagnosing
We're talking
fictional
Beezus?
characters. Her
Beezus.
little sister.
Yeah.
Beezus, yep.
Yeah.
It is my pet theory that Ramona has ADHD. And if I had been able to I just saw so much of myself in her as a kid. And I think having that language around a character like that who really isn't, her mental health is not the center of those books.
Right.
So having that to apply to kind of regular seeming kids, I think would be so helpful.
Yeah. I think middle grade novels for real are great tools for discussions on lots of things.
Yeah.
But imagine if kids and teachers had the language just to frame anything
That's right.
in realistic terms around language around mental health literacy. That would just help shape so many conversations, even in world events too. I mean, that's getting outside the scope of English teaching, but just understanding the world a little bit in terms of mental health literacy, I think it's going to change a lot. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the next generation. In fact, now that we're talking about young people, I would love to share that we have a free resource.
Yeah, it just came
on
out,
our
right?
website. Yeah. It's the Young Adult Advocacy Toolkit. And we had the most amazing group of 10 young adults with a small team of leaders from our advisory who led them throughout about 7 or 8 months of work that we compensated them on. They got together and they built this toolkit that is a remarkable document. It involves government advocacy, individual advocacy, community advocacy. It obviously frames mental health literacy quite well. It talks a lot about things that young people are looking for information about, and it shares it safely, and it actually ironically, it talks about sharing safely, too. And it really addresses so many things that I think young people will really find valuable, and I hope that their trusted adults will find valuable. So we would love for people to download that and share it widely. Our young people worked so hard on this, and we just can't wait to share it in the world.
Would you say if it's between this toolkit and getting the same information from TikTok, which one would you say?
Well, let me think. I'm going to lean into this advocacy
Okay,
toolkit. I think it's just a wee bit more accurate.
Okay, so they spent more time on this. It's not necessarily going to shock you with the advocacy piece, but it will inform you and actually help you change and improve the trajectory of your life, along with understanding mental health as a concept.
100%. And actually, in the toolkit, they talk a little bit about social media. They don't really talk about misinformation or anything like that, but they talk about how to share safely on social media. So it actually does touch on some of the concepts that we're hearing a lot about. So I think the toolkit's worth looking at. And frankly, there was more to it than what we actually ended up launching because they put together so much work. And so there's another piece of it that we're going to be launching later that we just sort of pulled out other aspects that we're going to share at a later date. And we can't wait to do that too. They just did such good work on
It's really amazing. It seems really comprehensive and accessible. And I was, even as I was reading through it, learning a lot. And I'm 39 years old. So I think like any of our listeners too, whether you have young folks in your lives or not, it's so worthwhile.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm really proud of that work. I'm really
you
proud
should
of
be.
it.
It's amazing.
What age, Annie, do you feel like would be the perfect age to sort of start reading the toolkit and maybe getting together with other young people?
I don't know that there's a real entry age. I think just at the interest level, there's nothing in it that's dangerous or anything like that. I think it's really developmentally of interest to maybe 12, 13-year-olds and up. That would be my guess. But I wouldn't keep it from an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old who was interested. I mean, there's nothing in it that's seriously adult. There are some things in there that say some of this work you might want to wait till you're 18 to do. So, I mean, it definitely frames it in ways that kind of put up a little bit of boundary around age appropriateness, but there's nothing in it that
guides them a little bit.
Yeah, I think upper middle school would be really interested. That's what I think.
I'm thinking too, just for parents, like as a parent,
definitely,
I want to read it.
Definitely.
And I have one 3-year-old and one 11-year-old, so I'm thinking, how different is life going to be? Hopefully, for the 3-year-old to come through and be given that information early on.
My hope is that's very well the case. And with the states making big jumps, like California, it has a law now. So with the states making those choices with policy, and then with the work that our state departments of ed are doing in the 47 states that we're connected to, we know that this is going to happen. And it's just a matter of putting one step in front of the other every day.
If people want to know more about the law in California, is there any, do you want to share a little bit on that?
Sure. In California, the law really requires mental health education in middle and high school if the school has a health class. That's the way the law is written. And there was actually another bill that was put forward this year and failed, unfortunately, did not pass, to make it more of a comprehensive K-12 kind of situation. This is very common, though, and I would not be discouraged in California. This is happening all over the country. It's unusual, quite honestly, that a K-12 policy passes quickly or whatever. It happened in New York. It happened in Delaware. And there are other states that have similar things. We've written actually a policy paper in the American Journal of Health Education. As I said, I kind of nerded out in the policy space for a while and was invited to write that paper. And,
but
and
don't all English teachers and music directors write policy papers? I mean, it just kind of seems like at this point.
Yeah, I think it's probably a really natural thing for me to have done.
Good.
Sure. Yeah. Direct Fiddler on the Roof and then go write a policy paper. Just a regular day.
It's just a little tired. I mean, you
just
don't
a
have to listen
day.
to me, but...
And then watch Schitt's Creek.
Yeah,
so at the end of the day, that's what I do.
You got to do that. You got to do that. Well, before I start going off about Chris Elliott, one of my favorites from the 90s, being in Schitt's Creek. You got to shout out to him.
Roland.
And his daughter. Yep, that's right.
Roland Shit. That's a funny name. Come on. I don't know if you can say that, but that's a funny name. Roland Shit.
I hope the transcript
I don't know
will
if they'll
show
allow
SCHITT.
SCHITT.
Yeah.
Yes.
Annie, it's been a pleasure with you. You are intelligent. You are someone who's driven. You're someone who has taken what seems like any and every challenge and tried to make it better for not just you, but for your family, for students around the country. And you're now at the center of this Youth Mental Health Literacy Council, which is, bringing, like you said, 47 states. We'll not name those other three holdouts on this podcast, but
Mum's the word. I won't say, but you can find the map on our website, and you can see what those.
Okay. Well,
if you want to,
no shame, some
no shame. That's right.
Just a little bit,
just a wee bit.
Yeah. But come out and be part of it so that we can include everyone and move forward. But I think what you're doing is necessary. I think that it starts the conversation, one that often people go their whole lives without having, and it normalizes and validates the human experience. And so thank you. We'll continue to support what we can and look at I encourage everyone, look at the toolkit. It's incredible. And it was developed with actual young people. That's right. So
young
I think
people
that's
from across the country.
Pretty rare.
We recruited them. We compensated them. These are incredible humans. Incredible.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to share before we go? Where do people, support or keep up with what you're doing? So
the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative, you can learn more about our work at themhlc.org, so themhlc.org, and you can learn all about our initiatives, our CGI initiative for higher education, and our interstate work group are two that I'm really, really exceptionally proud of. Oh, and we have one more thing coming, so look out for this. For K-12 education leaders, we'll have an evaluation tool available by the end of the year to help people select the right programming for their school. So we're doing that in partnership with some of the interstate work group folks. So we have a lot of work to do. Every day it's something new, but we're really happy to be here, and I'm so grateful for my time with you today, Marlon and Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Here we are again. Marlon helps.
May I help you?
I hope so. This is another one of those asking for a friend questions.
Okay.
I just want to talk about, can you make imposter syndrome make sense to me?
Yeah. I think it's pretty similar to when we're in middle school and we think everyone is thinking about us, but they're not. They're just thinking about themselves. I don't know. We have this tendency to think that we're the only ones in a situation, or that everyone else is a genius and we're not. Like, we hear someone say something smart and all of a sudden we're like, oh man, I couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. But you probably could. You probably have. We don't have great self-awareness. We think we do, but we don't. I don't. Why do you feel like, you said asking for a friend, how has your friend felt that way before?
Yeah, I think so. I do think it's okay and normal to feel it. I don't beat myself up about it too much. But what is it doing?
What is the purpose of imposter syndrome?
What's it there for?
I don't know, because some people, I feel like maybe that's good because you don't really, some of it's real. It's like realistic. Depending on what your expectations are.
Right.
We're all sort of imposters. No one was born knowing how to do certain things. There's a few genius-y people along the way, but that doesn't make them more valuable. I think sometimes we underestimate ourselves and overestimate other people.
I think this might take a little bit of a left turn now, but you saying that it is similar to me of like when people will say, like, would you like talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend? It's like, it's a similar kind of thing where it's like you overestimate what other people can do or are doing or whatever. But it's a similar thing of the expectations we place on ourselves being much higher than we do on other people. And so both of those things kind of working together, I guess.
In some ways, it's like we tend to focus on ourselves a lot too and constantly measure and compare. Those things aren't really that helpful. And one of the best antidotes for imposter syndrome that I've found is humility and gratitude. Because imposter syndrome can feel like almost like knowing that you're too prideful about something. And that can be a good thing. Like, you should probably listen on some level to the message that's sending. And true humility isn't, thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking of yourself less. And there's this really awesome book called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness by Tim Keller. He was a pastor, I think,
I love
Manhattan
that
for a long time. Yeah. It's only like 50 pages, and it's pretty, he's fully Christian. He's not seemingly political, really. So don't think like right-wing sort of Christian nationalism. I think it's more just he's talking about what it means to really actually be part of the community you're in and be just as important as everyone else, but not be not be the hero in every story in your mind, or not feel like you have to be.
That's great. I think one of the things that, again, it's not really imposter syndrome, even though that's the first thing I asked about, but just thinking about that more of like being sort of self-obsessed or too self-focused, is I have never been in a situation where I had to I'm just thinking of examples of like a tricky text or email or ask I had to make that felt really all-consuming for me. It has never once been as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be in my head. I can't think of a single time where...
It's hard to get perspective.
But every single time I panic, yeah.
Yeah, it's... Part of that is we're just not around enough people that know us and love us and are reflecting our value back to us as often as we probably need. And so the more time we spend alone, the more time we have to sort of second guess.
That's right.
Ourselves and think about ourselves and our place in the world. And our place in the world really is with other people. It's in deep connection. And that's where our meaning comes from, is, our relationships, whether it's, spiritual or just our typical, family or significant other our relationships. That's what makes life worth living. That's where we experience being human the most, is with other humans. I think when you think about imposter syndrome, you have to deconstruct it a little bit and ask yourself, what are my expectations? What am I hoping for?
To be perfect and never make a mistake. What do you mean?
Right.
And to be so impressive that people can't believe it.
All the stuff, all the things people say. I'm comparing my insides to other people's outsides. All that, it's all just stuff we need to be reminded of. And if we have people we love and trust around us, or we've invested into those relationships, another really helpful thing for any kind of worries we have and times we get in our own heads is to get out of our heads and let someone else into it, because that perspective we need, there's no better, for me, a couple times a year I hang out with a group of friends that I've had since high school, and no matter what any of us have done in our lives, we know who we really are. I know them, they know me.
That's right.
And there's nothing I could say to convince them that I'm anything that I'm not. And I love that, because it reminds me what life is really about. And there's really a lot of this stuff we think about and worry about doesn't mean anything. One thing that's helpful for me, and something I used I gave as homework to clients in a private practice setting, was when we get those things where we can't seem to get perspective and we think, why am I freaking out so much about this? Why am I so anxious about this? So like you mentioned an email or trying to send a text. Like, would it make a good news story? And what would it look like on the front page of like the New York Times or something? Like, podcast producer sends awkward text. Like, nobody
Right.
cares about
Nobody
that.
cares.
Like, no one's ever going to really give a shit.
Yeah. That
So
pulling back, I think, is
Yeah.
hard, but feels useful.
the other, a little bit more morbid, but pretty stunningly effective technique is to put it on a tombstone. Be like, here lies podcast host and mental health advocate Marlon Morgan, and one time he sent this ridiculous text that he never got over. It's just, you have to really sometimes you have to put stuff into perspective. And if all else fails, ask yourself how much you care about a text that you got 6 months ago.
I don't remember any of them.
How could you? Yeah. So sometimes that helps. It's a bit of a relief. You don't have to be anyone you're not, and you don't even have to be anyone you are. Just be.
I love that. Thank you. That was really helpful.
Thanks for allowing me to try. Thanks for joining us today. We hope it helped. Stay connected with us at thishelpspodcast.com.